Good evening, everyone. Welcome to all of our families near and far. For some it is good evening, for others it's probably good afternoon and good morning wherever you are in the world. Thank you for making time for this evening webinar on Spring 2021 updates with our families and parents. We hope everyone is well. I'm here with colleagues from across campus. And so first and foremost, let me remind everyone that we will be recording this session. In addition, if you need live captioning, the live captioning is provided in the chat window. And so please access the chat window for live captioning. I'm Fanta Av, and I'm the Vice President for Campus Life and Inclusive Excellence here at American University. And I'm going to ask each of my colleagues who are here with me to introduce themselves. First, we'll start with Wendy Boland.
Hi, Wendy Boland, Dean of Graduate Studies.
Next, Jessica Waters.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Waters. I'm the Dean of Undergraduate Education and Vice Provost for Academic Student Services. And I'm also a double eagle. I've earned my undergraduate degree and my law degree from AU.
Thank you, Jessica. Next is Chris Silva.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Christopher Silva, Director of Housing. Thank you.
And next is Ashley Boltuchek.
Hey everybody, Ashley Boltuchek, any and all pronouns, and I'm the Senior Associate Director for Residence Life.
And then last but certainly not least is Peter Starr.
Hi all, it's Peter Starr. I'm Acting Provost and Professor of Literature.
Well, welcome again to each and every one of you. For the hour that we have with you, wanted to make sure that you knew what the agenda is for this evening. First, we'll start by talking briefly about the decision and the context. Then we're going to talk about class modality and the curricular features for the spring 2021. Then we'll briefly touch on the student experience and co-curricular events and activities. And then we'll talk about the residential opportunities and finish up with health and safety. And then we'll take some additional questions. The team in parent engagement has received your questions, and we've had an opportunity to go through your questions so that we have been able to put them in the various categories, and we'll make sure we touch on as many of them this evening as possible. If we don't get to all of the questions this evening, please know that we'll continue to update our frequently asked questions, and we'll continue to communicate out as more information becomes available. And so with that, we're going to start with first with the decision and context. So the decision and context for the spring 2021 really in many ways is an augmentation of fall 2020. Once again, we are dealing with external factors that continue to impact our planning. We are in a, if not daily, every other day basis with our peers in the Washington DMV area, as well as also in regular communication with the Department of Health and also the Office of Planning of the Mayor's Office here in Washington, DC. It's no secret, I think, to all of us as we're looking at the map that there's a rising number of COVID-19 cases around the country. And a reminder to all of you that when we spoke with you for the fall planning, which was in August, at that time, DC was in phase 2 of its reopening. And we're now in October. This is the last week of October. And a reminder that DC is still in phase 2. Since that time, we have now moved in terms of phases, because the DC Mayor's Office has looked at the number of cases, and they've decided that it was important to really have a very measured, phased approach to reopening, even though it was estimated that we would be in phase 3 by probably late September, early October. That has not panned out. So we're still in phase 2 in terms of DC. And just also as a reminder that with DC, at this point, the daily case rate is at 8.7. And the Mayor's Office had indicated that if cases were below 5, then they'll be able to move to phase 3. So we're still in phase 2 as it relates to Washington, DC. And then also our neighboring areas, Maryland and Virginia, have gone back and forth in terms of phases based on the environment that we're in. COVID-19 testing capacity is another factor. Once again, there were many questions asked, and these are very legitimate questions about how is it that institutions in other parts perhaps of the country have been able to successfully reopen, have been able to bring back their students, and why is it the case that in the DC area in particular, institutions are still not there. I will not spend as much time on that in terms of what are some of the various reasons for that. We have been in regular communication with our colleagues in different parts of the country. certainly whether it's been Jessica talking to her peers, Peter Starr talking to his peers, and myself talking to our peers, along with Chris and others, we've been in regular communication with our peers around the country as well, in addition to the consortium of universities here in the Washington area. How we measure success, I think, varies. None of us, I think, have missed the headlines on what's happening on various campuses, where there's been phases of reopening, and then there's been lockdowns, and then there's been reopening. We've also seen cases where folks have had to relook at their measures for compliance with health and safety standards, et cetera, and so forth. For us, the other piece that has come up is, it was our hope, I think, like any institution, that also coming to October, that testing mechanisms would not only be more advanced in terms of the turnaround time of test results, but that there'll be other testing that would become available. And we're finding that even for the testing that we're doing, it is taking 48 hours, which many would say is actually a good timetable, relatively speaking, as opposed to perhaps in some cases 5 or 7 days and so forth. But I think we've also noticed, we've certainly seen, and we've in conversation with our peers, that the timetable for test results really does matter if you want to avoid community spread and if you want to do effective contact tracing as well. And contact tracing measures change from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. How it's done in one state differs to another state. We do not have, what is sort of a standard for how these things are done, and they vary from state to state. So yes, comparison can be made by state, but it's important to also understand what are the factors that are at play as well. And then local public health requirements. Again, we are in constant communication with the Department of Health, and certainly concerns around community spread remains, particularly with folks who would be traveling. Again, in the DC area, we continue to have quarantine. And if anyone has read recently, you will see that, again, when we started in the fall, there were a certain number of states, and now the number of states that are under quarantine has actually increased from when we first had our conversations in the fall. So things are moving in a different directions as far as quarantine of different states are concerned. It is the case that they will continue to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis as we move forward. So the local public health requirements are important, and we have to also work with our local public health officials, and in this case, certainly the DC area, but we also have members of our communities who live in Maryland and Virginia. And so we have to really work with 3 different jurisdictions as we look at issues of public health as well. And then local K through 12 schooling for our faculty and staff as well, who in their work, as you well know, and you continue to follow the developments, the K through 12 sector continue to also have its own challenges of when they're going to be operational, how much of it is remote versus face-to-face, and that continues to be also a set of unknowns as we move particularly through the winter months and the number of cases of COVID-19 continue to increase. So these external factors continue to be real for us. We know that for families, it's been a source of frustration that we go back to public health. But when we first started this, in transparency, we were very clear in saying that our decisions will be driven by health and safety, and that they'll be driven by our mission of education and learning, and that also the third measure would be that our decision will be driven by community and the need of our community. And for us, the community is not only the American University community, but it is also the DC community that we very much belong to and feel we also have a social responsibility to this city and its surrounding areas as well. So those are some of the contextual reasons for the decision as we move forward. With that, we're going to move to the next slide, please. Now we'll turn it over to my colleague to speak about class modality and where we are for spring 2021.
Thank you, Fonda, and I want to just recognize Fonda's hard work on this, extraordinary work on this. I think when she got her PhD in sociology at American University, she probably didn't think she was going to become an expert in infectious disease and epidemiology, but she certainly has, as you will have seen. We have done, you may or may not know, we have done this semester, this fall, approximately 40 classes in a partial face-to-face modality, largely in the visual and performing arts, in the media arts, and in one science, in chemistry. This has gone reasonably well. In fact, the students I'm told are quite pleased with how it's gone, and the professors are quite pleased with how it's gone. Because of the situation of the pandemic, we are not able to ramp up as fully as we wanted to, frankly, as fully as we wanted to with the AU Forward plan that you heard earlier in the summer. But we are going to ramp up the number of courses that are offered on campus for students who are in particular segments of our student population. Again, we are going to offer courses in the visual and performing arts, always at physical distance, always with masks, always with all the health and safety standards that we've put in place very much in mind. We're going to offer a select number of courses in communication, in the School of Communication, particularly in the media space with filmic arts. We are going to expand slightly the number of courses, not just chemistry courses. We have some advanced courses in chemistry. We're going to do some courses in biology, chemistry, physics, and that's probably the extent of it. We will have all these course modalities up on the schedule of classes in Eagle Service by Monday, that is to say November 2nd, when registration begins. And we will get an email out to your students saying exactly how they can find out what the modality of a specific class might be. So that's in process right now. It's really happening over the course of this week. My colleagues are working very hard on that one. So we're more than doubling the number of in-person classes, but bear in mind, let's think of this in terms of the scale. We normally will offer upwards of 4,000 classes in a face-to-face modality in a regular semester. Now we're going to be doing something in north of 100 classes, but not a whole heck of a lot more. So we're doubling the number. The classes will start on January 19th, the day after Martin Luther King Day. That was the decision that we made. It was a very difficult decision. We are very cognizant of the fact that our students and our faculty are stressed because of the stress of being on Zoom many days in a row, are anxious, feel the need for mental health breaks. But when push came to shove, we looked around at our peers. We looked around at what people were thinking about sending students home for a break. And we decided, as the vast majority of our peers have decided, that having students travel for a week or 10 days in the middle of hopefully the tail part of the worst of this pandemic was not a good option. So we have decided to cancel spring break. We are giving an extra week in the winter break, starting the day after Martin Luther King Day, the day before Inauguration Day, which happens to be an AU holiday every 4 years. And we're going to go straight through to the end of classes as normal. We have thought long and hard as well about our tuition discount. I will tell you, I'll be honest with you, we as a university are in very good financial shape. The long-term health of American University, thanks to the foresight of those who came before us, is very sound. But the tuition discounts are hurting us. But we thought it was the right thing to do for our undergraduate students and for our graduate students. So this coming semester, the 10% to a community care discount, tuition discount will continue. Washington College of Law is going to be raised to a 5% discount. So that's it for the class modality and curricular features, and we'd be happy to take questions down the line.
Peter, it might be helpful because I know this question came up, and so I think it's important for us to try to address it. There's a question that came up about why these specific areas and domain areas for face-to-face in-person classes, will this be decided?
Thank
so
you,
if you can
speak
maybe to that.
Yeah, so we're talking about areas where there's a physical aspect to instruction. I'm a literature professor, as I said to you at one point. The teaching of literature can happen over Zoom with very little loss of what happens in a face-to-face classroom. And that's the case with many of our disciplines, to be honest with you. We're a very social science heavy university, and a lot of the social sciences can be taught reasonably well over Zoom. When you talk about a drawing class or a painting class, when you talk about a chemistry class, when you talk about a biology class, some of them can be taught well, and our faculty have really done an outstanding job. I hope you agree, and I hope your students agree, that our faculty have done an outstanding job this semester really doing as best we possibly can. But there are some modalities that are tough. For example, if I'm a film student and I want to take out a $5,000 camera, rent it from the School of Communication or borrow it from the School of Communication to shoot a film, the School of Communication can't ship it to me in Arizona and then have me ship it back. So there's some logistical equipment-based things that students can't do. There's this very small number of students who are also working in faculty labs, on approved research projects. Obviously, they're upper division students as well. Those folks are on campus through a very, very considered rigorous protocol that is called our return to research protocol. We are trying to do small numbers of classes to accommodate two other populations. One is international students who might need a course in order to come here, get the visa to come here and study here in the US. They're not already here. Those who are already here can continue to take courses online. And then finally, we're trying to do a very small number of classes, partial face-to-face classes, for students who need a required course that is in many, many sections. In other words, one of the things we've learned, and higher education has learned over the course of this semester and last spring, is that simulcast courses, what we call simulcast courses, courses where some students are face-to-face and some students are online, they're very awkward, and they're particularly awkward for students who are online. So what we're trying to do for our partial face-to-face courses is make it in a course that has many, many sections, and we'll dedicate a small number of sections for students who are here in the DMV and want to take those courses. So that's essentially, Svante, your answer to that.
Thank you, Peter. I know the other piece that we've heard also a lot from families and from students about is the spring break and the cancellation of spring break. And we certainly have heard from you, and we very much understand also this piece about the need for some break and how to kind of think about that as one is going through the semester. And I think some of the comments we had received was, if you have a small number of students who are here anyway, what difference does that make in terms of canceling spring break? I think one of the things that I think we've all seen is we've seen with some of the major holidays, whether it's been the 4th of July, whether it's been the Labor Day weekend, and now I'm sure we'll see with Thanksgiving, and we'll see again with the winter holidays. We've seen that during these periods of time where there's been a period of time of break, wherever it is in the country, we've seen an increase in the number of cases that have come up. So I think for us as an institution, as Peter mentioned, these were not decisions that are being made lightly. We recognize that there is a need for some break for all involved. And so we will continue to look at what might be the opportunities to provide the break without also having this exacerbating the situation in a different direction. And so it's to recognize that, yes, spring break is not only for folks that to travel, it is also to be able to have a kind of break, whether it's a mental break or a physical break. And we do recognize that, and we'll be looking at to explore ways in which that can be provided as well. Can we move to the next slide, please? And I'm going to leave that to my colleagues to now jump in.
Great. Thank you, and hello, everyone. There's been a lot of questions, of course, about modality, how many classes will we be offering in person, and when that modality will be available. And as Provost Starr mentioned, we plan to have this information up for students in the registration system when registration starts next Monday. Our Office of the Registrar is working very quickly and very hard to make sure this information is up, and we'll make sure that students know exactly where to find this information. We can go to the next slide. If my student is not able to attend in person, could they continue remote study? And absolutely, we are completely committed to our students wherever they are, whether they're in DC or they're anywhere in the world. And as we had mentioned, the majority of our courses are still going to be offered online, and we will be making sure that all of our students can advance their degrees and move forward with their degrees with online courses in the spring semester. If your student is at all concerned, you can ask them to please reach out to their academic advisor, and the academic advising teams will be happy to work with them to make sure that they feel comfortable with their schedule and the courses that are being offered. The next slide, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Dean Waters.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us. We pretty much talked through a lot of the questions on this slide about why we made changes to spring break. A couple other pieces that I wanted to note here. Undergraduate students begin registering on November 6th. So we will have the modalities up in advance of registering for classes, which starts on November 6th for our undergraduate students. Also wanted to note that the end date for the semester remains the same. So as students are trying to think through what their semester looks like and think through plans for final exams and final projects, that date has remained the same. So the big shift for our students this year is the question of starting a week later, and hopefully that gives our students and our faculty and staff a bit more of that winter break, that time to recharge and set a game plan for the coming semester. And then we will not have spring break, but we'll keep the rest of the schedule of classes and exam dates. And the next slide. We've had a lot of questions from our students and our faculty, noting that this is an incredibly hard semester, right? And I just want to say to all the parents out there and the families, you're doing a great job. You are all here supporting your students, probably for most of you after long days or nights at work. And we really appreciate the support that you are showing them and all the guidance you are providing. You know, I'm a parent of 2 boys myself. I get it. I'm managing online school while we're doing this, and just shout out to all of you. One of the things that we really need to address with our students is making sure that they have what I call pressure release valves. It's an incredibly stressful semester, and we are making adjustments to our academic policies to make sure that our students have some of those options. As they're looking at their classes for the semester and they're realizing, hey, I'm knocking it out of the park in 4 classes, but in another one, I'm really struggling and I just don't have the bandwidth to do this right now. We have adjusted our pass-fail policy. So on the undergraduate side, we are allowing our undergraduate students to take up to 2 classes on a pass-fail basis, both in the fall 2020 semester and importantly in the spring 2021 semester. So that's an expansion of our normal pass-fail policy that we did explicitly to recognize the challenges that students are facing right now. And Dean Boland will talk about the graduate side.
Great, thank you. On the graduate side, it is a 1 class offering to allow that 1 class to turn into pass-fail. And this is both for the fall semester and then also again in the spring semester. The one other really important change that took place is that allowing this option to occur after grades have been turned in. And the reason for that is because what we realized when we had this option available for students last spring was that students were really trying to figure out and you know where they were in the class. This was putting pressure on the student unnecessarily. It was also putting pressure on the faculty to try to turn grades around even faster so the student had a good idea about whether or not they wanted to make that selection. And what I can tell you is we heard from so many students at the undergraduate and graduate level that said, oh, I actually made, you know, a B+ or an A- or even an A in the course, and I wish I hadn't opted in for pass-fail. So in order to alleviate some of that, this is why we moved this option this semester and are allowing the pass-fail to happen after the term is complete and once grades are posted. And here your students will have a very specific window of time to make this assessment. If they will not be able to make that change outside of that window because it's important for, you know, all of our other processes that need to take place, graduation and everything, that we have a set window, but students will be communicated and will know clearly the process and how to do this. And so again, at the graduate side, it is 1 course. There is some people have said, why can't it be all? And the reason for that is because we're really looking at the degree. We want to make sure that we're not hurting our students at all in terms of, you know, going out in the job market, applying to graduate school, applying to other programs, and really making sure that they have all what they need to move their degree forward. We still have a lot of policies in place to help students if there's unforeseen circumstances, right? Medical issues that arise and things like that, and all of those things still take place. But on the undergraduate graduate side, we did want to make sure that we had that release valve, as Dean Waters had mentioned, for all of our students to help them.
And one other policy change I'll note, and you should sort of pro tip, ping your students on this. Ask them if they've thought about this policy. We used to have a policy called the freshman forgiveness policy, which would allow a student to repeat a course and replace the grade if they had not done well in a course in their first year. This summer, recognizing again the pressures that our students are under, we actually expanded that policy to span the 4 years of undergraduate education. So students can use that course repetition and grade replacement policy for 2 courses over their time at AU across the 4 years. So if your student says, hey, I did really poorly in this course, say, have you looked at the course repetition policy? Because there might be a way for them to retake the course and replace the grade. And then
And I think the important piece that Jessica has mentioned, and I think it's worth repeating again, Jessica, is the fact that with the policy change, it's over 4 years. So this is not just in your first year, which I think is important for our students who are looking at, who are our sophomores and others to really understand this. So if you can just say it one more time, I think this is an important one, because I know this is something that students have not necessarily paid attention to, but it's important.
Absolutely. So it's called the Course Repetition and Grade Replacement Policy. And at any point over a student's 4 years at AU, so first year student, sophomore student, junior student, senior student, they can use this course repetition policy, and they can use it for up to 2 courses. So applies to all of our undergraduate students, including transfer students.
Thank you.
I think we're ready for the next slide.
Yeah, next slide, please. So what kind of support services are available remotely? Maybe my colleagues want to jump in as well. Jessica, I'll have you start and then we'll pick up from there.
Yep, I think this one is me again. So right now, in this fall semester, we have successfully moved all of our academic support services online. So all of our academic advisors, both at the undergraduate and graduate level, are doing fully online remote advising. They're setting up one-on-one appointments. They're doing group advising appointments, offering all the services that we always have. And one of the sort of unanticipated benefits of this time of COVID, many of our advisors report they're actually having deeper engagement in these Zoom settings, right? Because students have to make a point to show up and be engaged in that one-on-one way that advisors are reporting they're actually finding deeper relationships with their students. I also want to note that our writing center, our quantitative support lab, our tutoring services, and our academic coaching are all also offered fully online. These are all part, of course, of the tuition at AU, and strongly encourage your students to look at these resources. The academic coaching piece in particular right now, I think, can be incredibly helpful, because that team has been specifically geared to help our students with online success. So what are the tips, what are the strategies to succeed as an online learner? So really encourage your students to check out all of those academic support services. Of course, all academic accommodations for students with disabilities continue to be offered, all reasonable accommodations. So we, of course, are honoring all of those for classes and exams and the like. And then Fanta, maybe you can touch base briefly on the Counseling Center and you at AU.
Sure, yes. So with the Counseling Center is operational. One of the things about the Counseling Center is that therapists are accredited at the state level. There is no federal sort of blanket policy for how those who are therapists work across states. So our therapists do work in the Maryland, DC, and Virginia area. In addition, there is a case manager, and the case manager has developed an extensive database of therapists that are in different parts of the country, especially in the country where we have more of our students who are currently residing, and is doing referrals as a result of that. And the database is quite extensive, both in terms of the diversity of areas of expertise, as well as types of counselors in different areas. So they're providing that as we speak. And in addition, the Counseling Center has been doing a series also of sort of, educational work with students. We just launched today a new platform that is a one-stop sort of hub for wellness, and it's called You at American Wellness. That was launched today. We've been listening to a lot of our students and others talking about the level of stress, but also talking about an integrated approach to health and wellness. And so this is launched for all of our undergraduate and graduate students as well. And students will be receiving much more information about that, and it's customized in the sense that the student have to go in, put in some information, and based on that, it will kind of provide them with different pathways, and then kind of go at the speed that the student needs and so forth, and also integrate the resources that we have at different parts of the university. So that is a new platform that was just launched, and there'll be more information coming forward in relations to that. Next slide, please. What can you tell us about spring 2021 commencement? Again, we really, we are literally looking at things as they evolve, and one of the things that you'll see in particular about the spring 2021 plan, it was intentional on our part to say that we know that things are evolving, that we need to evolve along with that. And so we will continue to evaluate and see what conditions look like for spring 2021. I think the other thing that you're also seeing from us is a balance. We're trying to get information out to you as soon as we can, with as much information as we can as it becomes available, knowing that people need to plan ahead and that there needs to be some decision made along the way. But as of right now, we do not have a decision made yet about spring 2021. Obviously, you've all gotten the message about December 2020 commencement ceremony and given where we are. And so there'll be more information forthcoming for those students who are our spring 2021 graduates. Next question, next set.
And I think this one's me. So
Yes.
talking a bit about, you know, the $1 million question for a lot of families is, how is my student going to get a job? Like, please guarantee me that once COVID is over, they are not going to move back home again, right? And that's what the Career Center is here to do. If we could pop the Career Center link in the chat, I think that would be really helpful, because you can see that the Career Center has very deliberately changed its approach to deal with internship and job searching in a virtual time. So you can see that every single one of their resources contemplates that, right? It's how to prepare your resume and prepare for interviews in an online environment, how to search for a job in an online environment. What are the questions you should ask an internship site if you were going to intern in person about health and safety? Can I do remote internships? So all of those pieces and all of their work has been geared for this new reality for students, both on the internship side and on the job seeking side for our graduating students.
And this is particularly important because we know, particularly for upper class students and graduate students, where you're getting closer to graduation, how important the career and the career focus is as we speak. So that's an important part of it. The other thing also that's part of our Career Center model is also how we deploy our alumni as well. Our alumni have become so engaged in also just helping our students, because we know that that network is incredibly important. And I think we've seen really our alum show up in force in all the ways that you can see them show up in force, to wanting to make sure that the doors remain open, making sure that as jobs and things become available, that our students are among the first to know about that. So know that we're deploying all of our assets that we have with both a really important Career Center that and the work that they're doing, but also our alumni being really an important part of that as well.
Can I jump in here on the alum piece, because it's just so exciting? You know, one of the things that we were looking at this semester is like, how do we provide like the best possible online education for our students and recreate some of that DC experience? Because we know that so many of our students come to AU because of DC, right? Because of the connections, because of the job opportunities and the chance to interact with, you know, the amazing people in DC. And our alumni network, we put out, like I like to say, like we put out the bat signal and they all just came, right? We have 30 different alums just in the past couple of weeks who have been joining our first year complex problems classes and actually joining those classes, doing lectures, many of them around the election and pressing issues that are of the moment right now. So those alumni connections, which translate into later internship opportunities and later career opportunities, are happening from day one in the classroom, right? You don't start that job hunt cold. You start it with all this background that you've learned in your classes and those connections that you've made.
Thank you. Next one, please. What if my student wants to take a semester off?
I think this is me again.
Yes.
So on the question of if my student wants to take a semester, so our deferral policy remains in place, right? So our students who were entering first year students and did not join in the fall, those are our deferred students, and those policies remain in place, and those are in place on the admissions website, which we could probably pop in the chat. You know, for your students who are saying, I don't know if I can do another semester online, right? Or you know, I'm exhausted right now. And the concept of taking, you know, 5 more classes in the spring is something that feels overwhelming. I would say a couple of things. One, at this point in any semester, we hear that from our students, right? That this is the point at which fatigue sets in. Because college gets really real right around this time, right? The finals are looming, the final projects are looming. So I would try to normalize a piece of that's part of the college experience for our students, even in the before times, right? Of course, that is exacerbated now. And I would strongly encourage you to talk to your students and say, please meet with your academic advisor, right, before you make any decisions. Think through what all of the options are. Think through what you can handle and what you know your students can handle in the spring semester. But these are the types of things we never want our students making these types of decisions on their own, because the facts on the ground are these. A student who takes a temporary leave from AU or any institution is much less likely to graduate on time and is frankly much less likely to graduate from any institution ultimately, right? So our number one focus is always to make sure that we keep our students well in every way, and we keep them academically well and on track to progress and graduate on time. So don't let your student make this without consulting with an academic advisor. Really important.
Important. Yep. Next one. So the student experience and co-curricular features. I know that right now, everyone is focused on getting through this semester. I think that's the goal for all of us, is how we get through the semester. And we're not that far off to, believe it or not, November is upon us. And before you know it, the semester will be over. But we also know that there's been a lot of question about the student experience and co-curricular features. And the co-curricular features really, we are looking at increasing co-curricular features both in the online and the virtual space. It's not one or the other for us, it's both. And how we do that will look different at different periods of time of the semester. So, for example, in terms of in-person, there'll be some face-to-face meetings and collaborations that we'll want to do. We're looking at mentoring. And again, looking at this alumni connection is an important part of, as we think about the mentoring work. We're looking at wellness activities, if they're here physically, access to fitness facilities. We're also working with our rec and fitness around what are some programs that people can join remotely as well. And then also looking at ways to explore DC and explore DC both in person and virtually as well. One of the things we know that is always attractive for our upper class students as they look at internship, for our sort of first year and sophomores as they look at DC, is trying to leverage all of what DC offers. And so part of it is also bringing DC to you. As you saw with the KPU event with Dr. Fauci. We have many such sort of events and features that we want to be able to do more of as we move forward, where our students can really engage with some of the sort of what I call the recognizable names and folks doing really interesting and important work that's taking place in the sort of the nation's capital becomes an important part of what we're looking at. We will also be looking at opening additional spaces for studying and for small group meetings, because we know that also for students who are physically in the DMV area, they may be in very close quarters and so forth. And so there's some challenges in coordination of their time, their spaces and things like that. But whatever we aim to do that is in person, we're also looking at what can be replicated virtually, right? So for example, how can faculty engage more intensely, for example, with students who are further away? Those are some of the things that we know our faculty have expressed really deep and great interest in, and they're already doing quite a bit of that. But how can we augment more and more of that personal one-on-one engagement, and in some cases, small group engagement? We would love to see, as conditions allow, to see people in different places be able to get together and really work with some of our parents to help us in coordinating some of those activities on the ground. Because again, the situation may look different in different parts of the country. So the question would be, are there opportunities for people to be able to maybe get together in an outdoor space where they could physically distance and where it is safe and where periodically they can engage with each other as part of sort of the co-curricular features? So we'll be looking at those things and continue to develop those as we move forward. Next slide. What will be available on campus? For those who will be in the DMV area, we have our library that has study spaces that must be reserved, certainly. And also there is, what we call sort of drive-by, I call it drive-in, to kind of get your books and so forth that you can reserve from the library. That's also part of it. We have opened up some spaces in Mary Green Center and the Don Myers building as well. We've also, heard from faculty that as we do that, they also want to be able to create some virtual spaces, right? Where they could do some office hours. That would be office hours with students one-on-one, but also maybe some office hours with students maybe in smaller groups, where they can be that level of engagement that is kind of part of, attached to as they're thinking of their curriculum as well. In November, it's actually next week, we'll have a bit more space open in the SIS building as well, and we'll test out the fitness center as well under reservations. The dining facilities are all closed. There is no option, including takeaway options are not available as we speak. And so there'll be more information provided, and that will be the case as we move into the spring as well, in terms of the dining options. We have our student cafes that are student-run cafes that are open right now, where people can get coffee and tea and a few snacks from there. But we'll continue to evaluate those as we move forward. Next question. My student has really been struggling to make social connections and feel a sense of community. What is he doing to help? This is one area we hear a lot about. And again, we are piloting some things. We learn from them. And if they don't work, we'll sunset them and we'll try some other things as well. So in some of these cases, it has been a combination of looking at what can be augmented from a co-curricular perspective as we work with our faculty, what can be augmented from the student perspective. We've had dialogue groups to try to bring students together in smaller groups. We've had our Center for Community Engagement and Service that's been looking at getting students involved in community service work in smaller groups. Those are things that have happened. And then we launched the Ego Everywhere, and we still need to kind of get another iterative process in relations to that as we move forward. We know that this piece about the social disconnection is real. It is real for our students. It's real, frankly, also for adults as well. And so this is across the board. It's not only first-year students who are feeling that, our upper-class students are feeling that, our graduate students are feeling that. And so we know that we need to continue to figure out what might be ways to look into this. We're also hoping that some of those social connections can happen at a local level, and we really do want to work with parents on how we can do more of that at a local level in ways that are catered to where people are and what makes sense in those places and spaces. So we'll continue to evaluate and to test out a couple of ways to think about the social connection piece. Are visitors allowed on campus yet? No, visitors are not allowed yet on campus. And as you can imagine, part of this is, as we said, DC is still in phase 2, and we really need to go at this in ways that are incremental. So we want to make sure that the density is reasonable. We want to make sure that people are complying with face coverings, with physical distancing and all of that. We want to make sure that we recognize who's a member of the community and so forth. It's also incredibly important because of contact tracing. As we mentioned, contact tracing in different parts works differently, and it's really important that folks would be coming, that we're able to, in cases, something happens and the Department of Health comes to us, that we're able to provide that information. We will continue to evaluate the situation, and as things evolve, we'll make sure that we will continue to adapt to the conditions as they evolve. But for right now, there are no visitors on campus allowed. Next slide. Residential, and I'll let my colleagues move into that.
Thanks so much, Fanta. Chris and I realize that we are standing between you and Q&A, so we promise we're going to capture some of those earlier set questions and then turn it over to you all for some live response. And so we're going to review really briefly some of the residential opportunities coming forward for this spring. And so the first component would be that we are slightly increasing our university housing in a limited way. And so we implemented an emergency housing process for the fall, and we'll go ahead and replicate that and expand slightly by including students who have specific requirements to be on campus. So some of those requirements, for instance, may include, as we've heard from our deans, those in-person instruction opportunities that are happening, and when they're meeting those modalities in person. And so we're also, many of you have had questions around what a mini-mester is, and so we're exploring the idea of being able to bring more students to campus, potentially in the late March, early April, to have a truncated experience on campus, especially for those who perhaps sophomores, we know we're here with you. We asked you to leave really abruptly when all of this started. And so we'd love to be able to capture some of you back with us, even if it's for a brief period of time, to make up for that lost opportunity. And then we're also looking to expand residential opportunities for this coming summer. And so those are some of the things that we've been hoping to expand. And I think this has actually set us up to have a really nice opportunity to do that. And you can go ahead on to the next slide. And so Chris and I are going to go through a couple of these brief questions. And so the first being, what will spring housing look like? So spring housing will likely, we're going to mirror what we've seen so far in fall, just in a slightly larger option. And so that has included the residence hall that does have students currently in it, is still being supported by our professional staff, and we have live-in staff who are supporting our residential community, just like in a typical year. They're still engaging in programs virtually, and as the weather has held out, some expanded conversations like outside together, which we know will be drawing back in very soon. The eligible students for on-campus housing for the spring, again, will be those students with acute housing needs, and then those who have required in-person connection to the DC area, either based on their class or a program of one of the programs that they're connected to specifically. We know that a number of people have asked about LLC, honors programming, ROTC, and what that might look like. And right now, for all of those cohorts, we do not anticipate any of those shared classes being held in an in-person capacity. And so because of that, unless a student meets an acute housing need or otherwise registered for an in-person class that is approved, they wouldn't be coming back as a cohort. Chris, would you like to share how we may apply for emergency housing if we're a student?
Certainly. Thank you, Ashley. And so students can visit our Housing and Residence Life website, where we have a specific page on emergency housing. And as you can see, the link at the bottom of the page, it's very easy, american.edu/OCL/housing, and find the emergency housing page. There's an application process that students would complete to explain their specific need, their acute need, or their programmatic need for emergency housing in the spring. And that application is reviewed by a committee with multiple colleagues, and then a decision is rendered for that student if they qualify for emergency housing. And as Ashley mentioned, this is something that we've continued to do from the beginning of fall semester, following a similar process with a committee made up of different colleagues. And related in this, the vein of housing assignments and housing availability, we know that several of you are already starting to ask about what does it look like? What comes next after emergency housing, right? What comes next year? And so we are working diligently on understanding and forecasting what next fall semester would look like, especially including what the housing scenario would look like. As we have in the past, our priorities and our guarantee to students who have been admitted to U is that first and second year students are supported by us, and we've also supported some juniors and seniors that have wanted to live on campus. And so that is our plan. We continue to work on this, and we hope to notify students as we have more information, as our plans become available in the next few months. And I would, as part of that, I would encourage students and families participating in this to not just go out yet and find housing for next year off campus. We love to house your student with us, with our supportive community, as I said, especially our incoming first years and our rising sophomores, the current first year students. And in this last piece of finding off-campus housing, when we think about spring semester, some students have asked us, some families have asked us, should we already be looking for off-campus housing here in DC for spring because we may not qualify for emergency housing? At this moment, while we have an off-campus housing site and off-campus housing page, we're not actively encouraging students to go out and find off-campus housing for spring. Please stay in touch with us, look at our updates, wait for our updates. As Ashley mentioned, as we've talked about this concept of the mini-mester, we're investigating this opportunity and perhaps other opportunities for spring semester, and we want to share those with you very soon, hopefully here in early December.
And our goal really with the mini-mesters is to to execute on that with the understanding that also for students who have an interest in taking summer courses, that there would be an opportunity to be in the DC area, particularly in the summer. And part of that is also by then you can do a lot more things outdoors. We know that there are lots of different pieces that you can do, whether it's doing more things outdoors, and also by then, there will be a lot more things in place that would allow for that. And so as Chris and Ashley mentioned, there'll be more information forthcoming, particularly around the notion of the mini-mesters, but also as we work with our colleagues in academic affairs around summer courses, as well as combining that with a residential component for students so that they would be able to have a presence in DC and have a DC experience at that time that is in many ways in one that is coordinated. So that's one of the things that we're working on. Next slide, please. Yes, so this is one of the things. Ashley, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add there.
Yeah, I think just slightly to expand on the mini-mester, I think what we know, we've had lots of questions about who might be eligible for this, how does it relate to classes, and then when do we think we'll have additional details, right? And so generally speaking, we'd be looking to offer this opportunity to as many of our students as we're able to, and all of those details are going to be sort of refined over the coming months, as Chris mentioned, as we look to sort of reshape what this could be and how we might be able to slowly expand our spring offering. I would, similar to the relation to classes, where the class modality would not change if a student were to come to campus as part of the mini-mester program. Also, what wouldn't change is the expectation around what the sort of what the setup looks like within the living space and the requirements of and expectations of students if they're living on campus. And so right now that means that our students are really predominantly staying in their own space, and they are, we don't allow guests sort of outside of the AU community to be on campus. And we would anticipate that that would be a continued effort in the spring for those who are living on campus with us. And so students who live within residence halls would be able to visit each other, but wouldn't be able to have outside community members sort of coming into the residence halls as a way to, again, to Fanta's earlier point, really make sure that we have good efforts in place for contact tracing. And so right now what we're anticipating is having details a little bit more refined by early December. So we're looking towards sort of the week of December 7th to be able to share out with our community a little bit more about the mini-mester.
And as Ashley said, the goal is to have that be available to as many students that are interested, with the understanding that our first year students who've never had an experience on campus would certainly be among the priority areas as we look at the mini-mesters concept as well. Next, and so December, by early December, you will get more information specifically about the mini-mesters and the application process, and all of those things will be more forthcoming as we look at December. Health and safety, it goes without saying, and I'm not going to spend much time on this because you can find it online. We're going to expand our COVID testing availability. Again, as we've looked at working with different vendors, one of the questions that was asked is, how are some universities able to do it and others not? One of the things that we've learned from the various universities is that you have some universities that are in more remote areas where in some ways they have the opportunity to have a little bit more of what I call a campus bubble. We are in a very metropolitan area, and that is very accessible to all major landmarks and so forth. And so that's something that has its own opportunities and challenges. And then we have found that some institutions that are certainly our size or bigger have had a very extensive infrastructure for testing, but they've developed a lot of that in-house because they either have medical programs and or have had the facilities to do that. And so, you know, even our colleagues who have medical hospitals, even they, as they've been in the Washington area, have been predominantly online because it's been much more challenging. So those are some of the things, but our health and safety guidelines are online, and you can take a much closer look at that as we move forward. And with the same thing with the mini-mesters, we'll have very clear safety guidelines that are going to be in place for that. Whether it's safety guidelines around testing, safety guidelines around, you know, community compliance, those will all be things that will be in place as we move toward the mini-mesters concept. Next, Karen, please. What's happening with international students? As Jessica mentioned, you know, and Peter, we're looking at to see what might be some opportunities for those who are overseas. If there's some face-to-face opportunities, how to do that. Certainly, as Chris and Ashley mentioned, also if those students are coming in, housing as well is another element of this. But more importantly, we're waiting for guidance from the Department of Homeland Security. We're working from the guidance that are from this fall. We have not been given any indication that those guidance will change, but as we've been down this road before with the Department of Homeland Security, one never knows. And so we're continuously keeping track of what are the guidance as they evolve, and there'll be more information forthcoming. Next slide, please. I think this is the information that I think it'll be available on the website, and I think you'll be able to easily have access to those. Those fees remain what they were last for this fall. So in that case, nothing is changing. There's been a lot of questions about the UPass. We have made a request with WMATA, and we're waiting to hear back from them. And so as soon as we hear more about the UPass, we'll be able to kind of communicate that back. Next, please. I think that's it for now. Lots to cover. Again, it's being recorded, as we said, and in the coming days and so forth, we'll continue to communicate. As Jessica mentioned, as we start to go through registration, it's really important for our students to be in communication with the advisors, and I know there'll be outreach happening also at the different sort of school level as well, but we just wanted to make sure that the communication is ongoing there. Anything else before? Is there a pressing question or thing before we close for today? It's a lot to take in. Okay. With that, I don't know, Peter, Wendy, Jessica, Chris, Ashley, if there's anything else you want to add before we close for the
day. One thing we did not cover was AU Abroad. AU Abroad is a very important part of who we are as a university and why people come to American University. We routinely rank in the top 10 or 15 in universities sending students abroad. We've made the decision that we are not going to cancel, or if we've canceled or suspended programs that have an intake prior to February 6th. Within about a week or two, we'll make some decisions about programs that are scheduled to start February 6th through mid-March. And then later down the line, probably in November, in December. But I want to let folks know that we actually our 3 AU Abroad centers, Brussels, Madrid, and Nairobi, are offering courses for students to give a sense of what it might have been if they had been abroad. And a surprising, wonderfully sort of heartening number of students have actually taken us up on that. That's a really strong, viable option. So if your student was planning to study abroad, have him or her consider doing something like that with faculty from our AU Abroad centers. It'll tee them up really nicely to be abroad when they finally do it and get there when we're past COVID.
Thank you, Peter. Any other comments? I think we're going to close for today. Again, you know, we will continue to monitor closely, and we'll continue to communicate out as more information becomes available. With that, I thank all of you for joining us this evening, and we will remain in touch. And to my colleagues for joining us this evening, thank you for making time. And I wish all a great evening, and be safe and please be well. Take care of yourselves. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.